Welcome to paraglidingtalk.com. I'm your host, Robert Michaels. So glad that you're here. If you're just chiming in, you probably saw a YouTube thing from Robert Michaels and encourage you to go live. I'm glad you decided to go live. And we're here tonight with episode 50. Can you believe it? We've made it 50 episodes with Paragliding Talk. I am stoked beyond belief. You guys are awesome. The chat's already going off the tracks. We've got special guests tonight, Gavin McClurg. Ben is also with us. Nick is going to be moderating the show. We have Larry from Para Orange Products, and Neil is going to also help me with the chat. I've got nothing but fire. I'm excited about what's going to happen tonight. We've got some giveaway stuff, and I do want to say thank you for sticking around for 50 episodes. If this is your first episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and jump on board because you're about to be wowed with flying, all things flying. No stranger to the show, Nick. Nick has helped get this show off the ground. Much of what we established in the very beginning was me asking questions about Nick and or asking Nick what I should do with the show, and he gave me a lot of really good feedback, and I think it works good because of stuff that he helped me with. And so he's going to moderate the show, and so I'm going to hand it off to him. Thank you so much, and we're going to do some fun stuff, giveaways tonight. Sit tight, get some popcorn, and enjoy this episode with Gavin McClurg.
Cool. Right on. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Gav, Ben, psyched to see you guys. Psyched to talk a little XAlps stuff. So for folks who don't know about Gavin, he's one of our more accomplished American pilots right now. Started flying in 2006, so 12 years ago. Did his first comps in 2012. So 6 years after he started to fly, started flying comps. A year after that, broke the North American foot launch record of 240 miles. Record still stands. I'm coming for you eventually, but it might be another year or two. In 2014, did the Rocky Mountains Traverse, which is the film that got me into flying. 700K traverse south along the Canadian Rockies down to the U.S. border with Will Gadd. 2015, year after that, he was the first American to reach goal in the 2015 XAlps, was 8th place overall. And yeah, that was where all the madness started. Year after that, did the North Unknown project, which was a unsupported full traverse by foot and paraglider of the Alaska Range with Dave Turner. You can check that film out, is North Unknown. And then 2017, competed in the XAlps again. Finished in 14th place, but didn't make it to Monaco. Only 2 athletes made it last year, or made it that year. One of the things that Gavin had asked me to kind of make clear is that maybe some of you guys don't know what the XAlps are. It's not a one-day event. It's not even a 2 or 3 day event. In 2015, it was a 301-mile race, 12 and a half marathons, what that is, in 10 days. So it's nonstop running and flying across the Alps from Salzburg to Monaco. It is a ball buster of a race. In 2017, it wasn't 12 and a half marathons. It was 16 and a half and 120,000 feet of vertical. If I remember right from high school, Everest is something like 28,000 feet. So that's a couple Everests. It is a big thing. So Gav, thanks for coming on the show. Since 2015, you've helped paragliders, including me, and pilots like me get fired up about the XAlps and Volbiv. Super psyched to have you on, and also super psyched to have Ben on and talking about training and getting ready for the XAlps. Thanks, guys.
Right on. Yep. Excited to be here.
Thanks, Nick. Hey, quick correction. The numbers that you rattled off for the XAlps were just what I did on the ground. That wasn't actually the race. So the race is in a straight line. It's a little over 1,100K. And so the marathons were what I did on the ground. It was 12 and a half marathons, the first one, 16 and a half marathons, the second one. And they were both about 4 Everests in terms of vertical climbing. But anyway, that's just what I did.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
So for those of us who've followed you and kind of been inspired by it, let's talk about some life stuff first. Since 2017, you had a little girl, had young Fallon. And then also in 2017, your longtime flying partner and supporter for both the 2015, 2017 XAlps, Bruce Marks, died. So you had 2 kind of really big events. Going into 2019, both of those have got to affect it. Let's see. So the first question I've got is, you've got Ben this year. Are you going to have another partner to jump in that third spot?
Yeah, and I think a lot of you guys know him, Revis, Suffin Gray, and he's going to be the other supporter. So he's going to fill the very, very difficult shoes that Bruce left. And yeah, we're really excited about that. He's an amazing pilot. There's really, Bruce is impossible to replace. We had a pretty magic team there, but Ben and I are really excited about Revis. He's super good with the technical stuff and the weather, and he's really psyched, of course. And so I think we found just the right person. And he doesn't know the Alps like Bruce did. One of the magical things that Bruce and I had was a lot of time together flying in the Alps, many, many years. And this will be Revis's first time in the Alps. And so, but in some ways, I think that's going to be kind of a little bit of Nick Nanon's magic for us. It'll allow me to really do what I do best in terms of just flying on instinct and stuff. And Revis can be feeding me all that super valuable information as we cross. So maybe in some ways it'll work to our advantage. And Ben's a pretty easy guy to get along with. So I think they're going to have a blast. That's, I don't even really know what they do all the time. I'm out with my head down. So I know that's an important piece of the puzzle, but I think those guys are going to get along, which is really, really important.
Yeah. I think they've got some stuff planned for you, and they're certainly talk about what they're going to do later.
Yeah, we got cat food coming for sure. Again, I'm sure.
So, okay. That's the third partner. That's a news break here. And then the second question I've got for you is, you got a daughter. How is that going to change your flying? Have you seen it change your flying? And how do you manage the consequences extending beyond you now?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, Nick, because you gave us these questions a while back. She was definitely really on my mind in the last race because she was born about a month after, the last day. And so the whole time during the race, I was just like, please don't let her be premature. Please don't let her be premature. But, I had this, it was very different flying with thinking about your family. I had never had that before. And now, of course, she's just more and more magical every day. So, I definitely have that in the back of my mind. I'm sure it has changed how I fly, but to be honest with you, I haven't noticed it. I still like to push it. I still like to take risks, but for sure, I think the combination of the podcast, actually, the podcast that I host and talking to all these great pilots and just years and probably a little bit of age, and certainly having my daughter, I'd like to think I'm just becoming a smarter pilot, but that doesn't mean I can't, go hard. So I think, Ben maybe be able to back me up here, but yeah, I don't feel any way that it's made me, not take the risks you need to take in a race like this, but it does. I think it is making me smarter. And that needed to happen anyway. So it's probably a good thing.
Ben, that's a good time to kind of bring you in as an intro. Have you seen any changes in how Gavin's kind of assessing risk and flying and thinking about training even?
I think we've had some conversations where he's definitely made some thoughts about, whether it was a bad day or super windy or dicey. At the same time, I think he's still sending it the way he always does. And the reality is he's a damn good pilot, and all these guys are. And the way they can handle the risk is just different than most people. So yeah. I think there's a big difference there.
Right, than the rest of us.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because I think, is it going to be, is this race something that's just like something really fun to do? Or Gavin, do you think of it as almost an essential part of your personality? Because that really dictates whether or not you make a launch. Is like, hey, if this is who I am, then I'm launching. Or like, hey, this is a good time, but I got bigger things in my life. Maybe you might say today's not the day to launch. Where 2 years ago, 5 years ago, you might have said, yeah, I'm hucking it.
I think I definitely would, call the ball if you need to, but to date, we've never walked down off a launch, and that's not because I'm just taking crazy risk. It's, I don't, the race is outrageous fun. We totally underestimated that going into 2015. I thought it was just going to be pure sufferfest, and Ben trained me amazingly well, and it wasn't painful. I mean, my feet were just totally destroyed, and that was because of the heat, but we got that sorted out in 2017. So, I mean, not to say there isn't pain, but if you train properly for it, all the hiking up with your best friend through the radical mountains in the Alps day after day after day is just awesome. It's so fun. And and so it's, first and foremost, it is the most fun I've ever had. And when the race ends, we're all just like, what the hell do we do now? It's, the anticipation of it and all the planning and the training and working with these guys. And I mean, I talk to Ben every day, and it's just magic, and I don't know how to have that much fun. And so, like, the scariest thing for me isn't the flying, isn't the danger, isn't the risk. It's that it's going to end. That's what sucks.
Right. Yeah. It's good. It's good. I don't know if I'd be able to approach it the same way, but I guess as your skill as a pilot goes up, you just start seeing things differently. Stuff that seems super risky now is like, oh, I can get that. I got that.
Yeah, you also get in a weird zone, and there's only one way to get there. And it's, it's not like the XAlps. It's, anybody that's done any big major adventure race, like Ben's done the death race and stuff, you get into this weird place in your head where it's like 24 hours of being in flow, and it just keeps going and going and going. And you start pulling stuff off that you wouldn't probably consider doing normally. Like, very little of the XAlps is recreational flying. I'm not bragging. It's just you're flying against the wind most of the whole course, and you're in the Alps, which is a super complicated place. And you're tired, and you're hiking a lot, and you're often dehydrated, or you haven't had enough food or whatever. And so it's dicey. You're not in that like great frame of mind, and you've done all your checks and all the stuff that we learned about going flying. But you get into this zone where you're like invincible. And you're not, of course, but it becomes fun. You're flying in these conditions that would typically be terrifying, and you're like, yep, got this move. I got it. And I can't say that that's always going to come back, but that's been our experience. And it's been our experience as a team. Last year in 2017, when I landed in a tree, I was kind of ramped up, and I was like, holy man, I just landed in a tree. And I got back up on the road and started charging. And the first thing, Bruce and Ben, and I was kind of like, I would have liked to have like a 2-minute debrief, like, wow, man, I just landed in a tree. And Bruce was like, okay, so here's where you're going to go. And here's your next launch. And here's, go. And I was like, we can't even man, okay, I guess it doesn't mean anything. I landed in a tree.
Ain't got time to bleed. Nope. So let's step back. A bunch of us found you through the movies, Rocky Mountains Traverse, North Unknown, or Surfing the Sierra, some of the earlier stuff you did. Can you talk about how XAlps flying compares to expeditions like that? What are the big differences?
Yeah, I mean, the big, like, Alaska was physically harder, and that's just because of the weather that we had, and so little of it for the first half was unflyable. But it's everything's different. Your approach is different. On the bivvy trips that I've done with like Will Gadd and Dave, the biggest difference we've had as a team is I don't ever want it to end. I'm out there to enjoy being out there and take my time. There's no racing involved. There's no speed component whatsoever. It's just fly when it's good and enjoy it. And if it's not good, sit in your tent and eat and listen to podcasts, so it's a very different dynamic. And I have tons of great food when I'm bivvying, and I don't worry about weight, and it's very different. Whereas the XAlps is just kind of adrenaline, just like shot of adrenaline right from the gun going off, and it kind of stays that way. I mean, you have your ups and downs for sure, but you're rallying, and to watch Bruce and Ben, to watch what they do, it just keeps you rallying. I mean, they're working in a lot of ways harder than you are. So it's pretty special.
Dig it. I would have thought they were pretty much the same thing, but it shows you how much I know about racing and expeditions.
Very, very different. Bivvy is more about for me, the flying is awesome, but it's more about the place and the hanging out and the chilling and the aesthetics of top landing and starting from the same place the next day. And I think the XAlps used to be a lot more like that. When I hear the stories of like from Will Gadd in 2003 and 2005, these guys were carrying pots and pans, and they'd wait for, their buddy was 10K behind them. They'd wait for him to catch up. And it was an adventure race, and now it's like, it's
10-day sprint,
Tour de France in terms of the technology. I mean, the teams train so hard, and they're so sophisticated, and they're so dialed, and they put so much into it. And you can't just top land and miss that last hour and a half in the day because you're in a really high position to be a perfect place to start the next day, but you're missing 20K, and that adds up. 20K every day, you're 200K behind. So you've got to just constantly move.
Dig it. Ben, from an outsider's perspective, we can see Gavin's got his own set of risk assessment, but to me, it seems XAlps is a pretty dangerous thing. If anyone out there has seen Free Solo with Alex Honnold, let's call that a 9.8 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as super risky, dangerous stuff. Where do you think XAlps fits in that scale?
I think it's to me, when I think about like Alex Honnold, he's in like a gunfight in the sense of there's a unknown component that, even as good as he is, they could lead to him dying. And I don't think these guys are really facing that. And they're really good at what they do. So I think people like us would say it's probably a danger of 8 or something. But for them, I think it's like 80% is probably a 4 to 5 because they're that good.
Yep.
And 15% is like a 6. And then there's the 5% that's when it gets dicey. And that's, the second day in 217 flying in the down flush of the fern coming from the north side to the south side, or, when Gavin landed in the tree, that was somewhat benign, but to get where he was in that much wind, posting up on those faces, which a bunch of the guys did, same thing. That's where you start going, yep, that's pretty gnarly. That all being said, it's definitely a bit of a back off from Free Solo for sure.
Yeah. God, what a movie. Yeah. The whole thing is so cool.
I would say that's a 10, Nick. And compared to him, I'm a 1.
It was just so incredible watching that.
God.
So speaking of kind of different sports, Gavin, you came from the background of kayaking and sailing and a bunch of work kite surfing in the water. Before we kind of get way into the details of the race, the gear and the strategy and the training and the stuff like that, can you talk a little bit about how you think of the Alps in terms of water flow or your understanding of water? Do you think of it as rough water or threatening conditions, or do you see like I'm getting pinned here under a waterfall? What does it feel like?
Yeah, I think that if you do any whitewater kayaking, which I spent many, many years doing, and doing really quite hard stuff, really quite really sketchy river kayaking stuff, it's almost the same. And I think people that have a background in boating and whitewater boating, sailing, kite surfing, any of those wind sports, or water sports, really understand paragliding and hang gliding, free flight much faster. They get really good at it really quick, because the air is moving the same way. What's awesome, but also scary about the Alps is, you can fly there a lot. There's a lot of flyable days. They're incredibly beautiful. As populated as they are, there's times in the race where, you will get to a spot where you're like, no way, no one's ever launched this. It's magnificent, but they're really complicated. Where I fly here in Sun Valley, we're right in the heart of the Rockies, and we typically have west wind, and we've got 6 ranges to our east, and we just, we get tall and we fly to the next range, and we get battered around and we get tall and we keep going. It's not complicated. You're just flying one way all the time. And, the thermals are strong and stuff. So in a way, it's good training for the X-Alps because the thermals are much more ratty and tend to be quite a bit spicier than the Alps. But the Alps is just like, there's so many valley systems and there's so much going on. There's the Bavarian winds, and there's the Mediterranean winds, and there's the Rhone and the Rhine, and it's a lifetime to learn them. And so, all the non-European pilots are automatically a real disadvantage, but also it's just, they're complicated and they will spank you. And so, yeah, I think the more you understand, all the differences in pressures and temperatures and humidities and all the things that can affect flight, inversions and, catabatic winds, because we fly till late. We're often like, oh, it's totally on, this is on. And then all of a sudden you're getting slammed by some air coming off a glacier, so it's the answer to your question is, you need to understand how water and air really works. And I'm thinking about that all the time. And Kriegel wins because he understands the global perspective of all that going on better than anybody else. There are guys that are faster than him on the ground, but he can fly because he's seeing all that stuff, not from a forecast, he's seeing it from instinct. He understands it. He understands the right place to be at the right time. And yeah, it's critical.
So it brings up an interesting point from, I think it's that Flying with Condors, the book that I just sent you about, is it Judy Layden, one of the ladies who's hang gliding and then got into paragliding later. She said at one of the comps that she won in hang gliding, she was sitting on the side of the hill in the Alps with Carrie Castle, and they were talking about strategy. And she had seen the previous day that Carrie had been flying really fast, like way faster than everyone else, but not like kind of sticking around. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And Carrie said like, "Oh, I'm waiting for the big thermals." And Judy had said like, "Oh, they're not here like they are in the Owens. This is a different, wildly different place." So do you think of, kind of go a little bit deeper on this, do you think of the Alps more as like a really narrow kind of technical, I don't know, canyon versus the Rockies being more like a big Pacific storm? Or do you not think in those terms?
I haven't thought of that, but that makes sense. You know, okay. I mean, I think that Pal Tack had sent me a message after the race because, day 3 in 2017, he and I were kind of in the same group, and we all got shaded out, and I bombed, and he carried on and kept going. And he was like, "Hey man, fast is slow in this race." And that's the main thing about the Alps. There are days in the race, both in 2015 and 2017, where you can hammer. It's hammer time. It's good enough that you can hammer a lot of bar and fly fast and fly through the 2-meter climbs because a 4-meter climb's out there. But most of the time, it's all about patience and flying slow and staying in the air at all costs, because even in a ton of headwind and you're only making 10K an hour, that's double your speed that you're going to be doing on the ground. The fast people are doing 7.5K an hour on the ground, but that's never in a straight line.
Yep.
That's like this in the, the valley bottom. So you've just got to stay in the air. You got to go back for climbs at all costs. So, you've got to recognize when you can fly fast. Like the first day in 2015, we had an epic day, and we, the top of the first 5 of us, I think, went 180K that day. It was on, and you had to fly fast. And, but most of the time it's survival. And so, we never have days like that here. It's not survival flying. It's not like, you're not trying to grab these 0.1 ups and just stay in the air. You're in 8 up climbs and you're like, yeehaw, it's very different.
So Ben, I'm kind of going a little bit off piece here. When you are looking at Gavin, do you think of ways to say, hey, his great strength is that he's willing to fly in really big air and take these kind of big risks and has all this experience, but the weakness is that he's impatient.
Sure.
Do you think of like how you're going to manage that throughout the race?
I mean, we talk about it. Gavin's very aware of it. And we talk about it before the race, during the race, at launch. We'll look at the conditions. It's always a conversation. And then, he's just got to perform.
Yep.
And when it's getting tricky, he's just got to slow down. And I think watching him race this year and just some different flying he's doing, I think it's really starting to be there. So
yeah. I'm psyched to see it. I mean, you've got this really cool, Gavin, you got this really cool advantage with the podcast that would be unfair if you weren't sharing it, but it's rad to see as you share it in your own progression and understanding something that you're already pretty good at as you develop. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about gear. I know there's some gear junkies on here, and some people are way into this. I think it's worth making the point, just my understanding as a beginning pilot and putting this on here, is that there are like 3 things important in paragliding. And they go in order of descending importance. The most important is the weather. The second most important is the pilot. And then the third, like the last 5%, is the gear. And when we talk about paragliding, we switch those things around and people talk all about the gear and they never talk about the weather, the piloting skills. So it's been good to see you handle really hammer on ground handling and kind of flying skill and really avoid gear stuff. But with that, I got to ask you, what are you flying this year?
Yeah, probably the light version of the Peak 4. There's a chance that the Peak 5 will be out, which will be the new END 2-liner, just a step below a full CCC comp wing. as I've talked about a lot on the podcast, I'm a 2-liner pilot, and I have been really enjoying the Climber. They're the Nivix version of the it's a 3-liner. It's a D. It's even spannier than the Peak 4. But I just like flying 2-liners, and the Skywalk, that's what Kriegel flew last time. He's on a 3-liner. Paul Guscherbauer's on a 3-liner. The no 2-liners ever won it. So I'm totally open to being, criticized about that, but I like the performance. I don't lose it ever. And, I think it has super nice. I mean, the big thing that Kriegel brought up that's important is that, you're flying tired. And so you want to be on something that, you can just launch with your eyes closed. You can land with your eyes closed in really dicey conditions. And you can keep it open when it's really dicey. And I feel like I do that better with that, with that 2-liner than anything else. So I'm carrying a little bit extra weight because of that, because it's not a true lightweight wing. It's just light risers and light fabric. But there's a chance that the Climber 2 will be out before the race too. And I'm pretty intrigued about that. So mine's not totally made up.
Okay. Dig it. Hey, for gear stuff, I mean, it came up in the conversation you had with Revis on your podcast a while ago. I was just re-listening to him, and he had talked about downloading hotspot files onto his phone or some instrument. And then he was saying, hey, I'm using that as a confirmation once I've flown somewhere. Now he's on your team on this one. He's able to kind of help you dial that in. Is that something that you see as being something you might do?
Yeah. So when we study the route, a really important aspect of all that, as soon as the route comes out in March, and then Ben and Revis and I will be spending inordinate amount of hours on X Contest and XC Planner, Tom Payne's brilliant application, and figuring out every possible way to get to every waypoint. So if the weather's northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, here's the wind. Because we try to anticipate any possible weather that we could possibly have, whether we're walking or flying, for every stage of the race. And using Skyways, which is basically hotspots on X Contest, but shows the track logs, because so many people fly in the Alps, you can really see where it's lit up and where things typically work. But in terms of having that on my phone or really thinking about that when I'm in the air, when I'm flying, probably not at all. It just doesn't work for me. There's, you just have to be flying on instinct. You got to be doing the bird thing, and you got to be reading the weather. And that's just one more data point that I'm constantly looking down into my instruments. Like we'll be communicating via WhatsApp for the most part, because radio, we just get way too far away, and it's an extra piece of gear that I'm not going to be carrying. And so as long as I've got cell and my team's got cell, then Revis will be, sending me only urgent, because he doesn't want to distract me, but he'll be sending me like, hey, I would think about taking this northern route. And I'm already going to know what that means, because we've got all the options. We've talked about it that morning. Yep. We've studied it for months. And so, I can on the fly go, yeah, good idea, or not, that's not going to work. Because obviously what they're seeing on the ground is different than what I'm seeing in the air. So like in the 2017 race, there was a day where Ben and I hiked up, Ben flew down, I could see from his flight that it was on, and I took off, and we were supposed to get a ton of cirrus, and I could see it coming in, and I was really worried about it, and I wanted to stay high. We were heading down towards Garda, and I would fly 5K top land, call Bruce, 5K top land, call Bruce. This is my whole learning how to be patient, learning how to be slow. And, there are days where that's what you got to do, rather than lose 2,000 meters and spend 3 hours hiking in the middle of the day. Sometimes it's better to fly slow like that, and, keep getting our radar, keep getting our weather. But yeah.
Cool. What are you flying on your cockpit? What's in there?
Phone. So on my phone, I'm flying Fly Sky High, the app, which is great because he gives me the airspace file directly. So I don't really have to figure out airspace in advance, because there's airspace all across the Alps, but there's only certain ones that Red Bull cares about. And if you hit them, you're a 48-hour penalty, you're hosed. So, the race is over pretty much. So that's terrific. It's not that I always have a little flight plan for that day on paper, because I'm an idiot when it comes to airspace. And so Revis will be giving me that, like, hey, you're going through this part today, think about that. But I've got my phone. I've got my XC Tracer Vario. The Redbull makes you carry a Flymaster live, so that's what's feeding the live tracking. I don't really use that much because it's just irrelevant for me. I mean, I've got it as a backup, which is nice.
Yep.
And then I've got my InReach Mini, and that's it. That's all. That's the only thing that's on my deck. So very lightweight. I'll have a battery in my jacket just because I don't have room for it on my deck that I've got plugged into my phone the whole time. No radio. All our comms are through the phone, or if we're out of comms, then we're using the Garmin InReach, which is magic. That thing's bomber.
You can use that with the phone, so that's pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
So we're actually using the InReach a lot. I wouldn't consider doing it without that.
Yep.
Psyched. Harness, are you running a hammock or seat board? Do you think it matters? What do you feel good on?
So I've always used a hammock. This is a really good question. I've always used a hammock. I've used the Sup Air Strike, the XAlps version, which is not the retail version. It's quite a bit lighter. In the last 2 races, I love it. It's a great harness. It's actually big enough that you take the pad out, you can bivvy with it, little bivvies, not like an Alaskan bivvy, but it's a great harness. And I feel it works really well with flying. I'm probably going to be flying the Gin. They've got a new XAlps harness coming out in April. It does not have a seat board. It's got a really kind of a stiff butt pad that'll be close to a seat board. If I had my way, I'd fly a seat board. Marco convinced me that that's the way to go in his podcast. I think he's right. They are more responsive. We are definitely flying in dicey conditions. I'm flying a pretty proper E&D wing. So yeah, I think I'd fly better if I had a seat board. I think a seat board's the way to go. I think manufacturers are they're doing pretty interesting things with pads.
Yep.
But they're not, a carbon seat board is ounces.
No.
So
what are you flying right now for training? Do you fly the same gear you're going to fly then, or are you flying a seat board now and then you'll switch over to hammock like a month out?
Right now I'm flying the Climber, and that's just because my peak's pretty out of trim. So I'm flying the Climber a lot, and I'm flying my Strike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Ben, let's do some strategy stuff, dude.
Right on.
What's the plan for using the night pass? You guys going to blow it the first night? What's going on?
Yeah, I've got a really good plan. We're going to not use it until never, unless we have to. That was a terrible answer, but no, that was a giant foobar on our part, mine and Bruce's specifically. They have a time and a place. For us in 2015, it was the time and the place to use it at the very end. If you look at like what I think it was when Benoit used his to get over those 3 mountains to get past the Matterhorn, there are times and places to use them. We have to feel real good that the beating that you're going to take from it is worth it. The other thing we found is that it's really not a night pass where you don't go to bed. You're just going to go to bed late, like 3 a.m. So you're going to get a couple hours of sleep, and then you're going to, be a little slow in the morning. And so there's a lot of factors that make that worthwhile. But there aren't a whole lot of them. It'd be pretty rare that we're going to decide to use that thing.
Yeah. So it's going to be something that you
sleep is really a penalty,
Yeah. Which is, that's not something that's always been thought of in that way, but with this race, the thoughts you have to think, the things you got to do, the way you got to keep your mind sharp, losing that couple hours of sleep is probably way more of a penalty than gaining those couple miles.
Yeah, that's the thing. Most of the time, the guy, when they pull it, unless it's the last night and you've got a proper foot race going on to get into Monaco. That was totally our plan in 2017. We had talked this out, but we knew that the weather was going to be terrifically bad. And we knew that there was a chance, like 3 days out, we knew there was a chance that there was going to be this really strong north firn, which always means it's sunny on the south side, which, if it wasn't that bad, firn is terrifying, but if it wasn't that bad, maybe if we could get on that pass and it was sunny and we could be the first ones there, or, we'd get a big jump on the rest of the crew. And so, I left the campground. I went to a hotel for 2 days. All I did was totally sleep. We had planned for this. It wasn't totally out of the dark, but that morning when I woke up, it was like, we're not using this. We're not doing it. And you just don't know. Like I never felt bad, like it didn't seem to affect anything, but maybe had we not done it, maybe I didn't bomb out the third day and my whole race would have been completely different.
Sure.
It's I don't know, that they both times, in the first race, I had 2 of them because I'd gotten top 3 in the prologue, and you get an extra night pass for that.
Yep.
And we were pretty convinced that using that first one hammered me. That was also probably a questionable call. And I don't question the call at all, but it was, it's hard. You're already not getting much sleep, and it adds up. And then, you tune that down to only 2 hours. I think it's most of the time it's a penalty.
Yeah. Dig it. Let's do one more on strategy, and then we'll do a break for the sponsor, Robert. So the last one before that is, Gav, you missed a climb last year. How do you think about like what happens if or when you miss a climb this year and you kind of know that you've made a big mistake? Can you talk me through your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think even like last time, it was, that missing that climb turned into a real kerfuffle for us. I mean, I lost my phone. I got lost in the jungle, and it was like, all the guys I was with, I think we were in, 4th to 6th at that point. And, 2 hours later, I'm taking off, and they had all gone in, tagged the turn point, and were flying right over my head. And, and I went another 10K, and they went 150, so it was brutal and absolutely demoralizing. And we knew right then, it was like, this is going to be hard to make up because the weather was just bad. And so it's demoralizing, but at the same time, I've got an awesome crew, and we have, we're all aligned with, okay, our conflict resolution is super simple. If we make a mistake, we talk about it, we learn, it never comes up again, and there's never any blame. And you always have to focus on what you've accomplished in this race. You can't be thinking about what's ahead. If I thought about what's ahead, I would have been Steven Gruber and done what he did and quit, and because he did the same thing I did. He did hurt his ankle. I'm not trying to be hard on the guy, but you have to be like, hey, we've accomplished a lot. This is awesome. This is super fun, and we are not going to win, but we're going to give it our all and just keep fighting. And, that's where Ben flipping me off every time he passes me on the road and serving me cat food. And, the jokes, that's, those are the Hail Marys. That's what keeps you going. And I mean, that's super important. You got to keep your head high in this race, because it's a long race, and opportunities come up. You will, if you stay positive, you will have an opportunity. We got one in this 2017. I don't know, when was that, Ben? Like day 5 or day 6 after Ashow. No one flew that day. We had 4 really magical flights, and it was awesome. We made up 100K that day. So you have opportunities, but you got to keep your head high.
Love it. Robert, take it away, dude.
This show is brought to you by Pear Orange Products. PearOrangeProducts.com. You need to go check out PearOrangeProducts.com if you're interested in finding your paramotoring and paragliding needs. These are paramotor and paragliding pilots gear made by pilots. So you're going to appreciate everything that they make. Larry and Chris make that stuff right there in Florida and the great United States of America. And they have some great stuff on their website. I want to encourage you to go check it out, PearOrangeProducts.com. And each week, on the 3rd week of the month, we do a giveaway. Larry gives away some stuff. We gave some stuff away in the last episode, whenever it was the last time. And so in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to do another giveaway. I do want to give a quick shout out. There's the show that we're going to have next week, next Thursday, is going to be with a guy named Ari. He is a acro pilot, credible pilot, and he has a super cool channel. If you haven't found him yet, you're gonna want to watch that show, and you're gonna want to subscribe to his channel, because it is really nice, really pleasing to the eyes. And also, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and to the Patreon. For the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can support a person's flying career. You never know what you're going to learn from this show. Every single episode, I've learned something and apply it to my life of flying, because flying is life for me. It's super fun, and it's supposed to be fun, not deadly. And so if you can fly safer, let's fly safer and learn something. And that's what this show is about. And I believe that that's what we're all wanting to see. So if you support the show, we'll keep it going, keep it rolling, and make it fun for all of us, especially make it fun for my wallet. And I'm investing in all the I haven't spent any of the money yet, but I made a bunch of t-shirts, and I'm not selling them, but I've been giving them away. And yeah, look, Nick's got one. I like it. Very nice. By the way, work is trying desperately to get.
I can
me
jump
to
in
go
there,
to work.
Robert. Give you
But
cover.
no, yeah. So we want to give something away, and I asked Neil to pull somebody's name, and so he's got that. I want you to sit tight, everyone. Just before we end the show, we got like 20 minutes. We're going to give away a Paratalk. Dear goodness. Paraglidingtalk.com t-shirt. And you know you want one. You know what I'm saying?
Dig it.
You only get one though, Nick, so you can't win.
All right,
But
I got mine.
please also go into the chat, or not the chat, the description, and check out the podcast. So if you haven't checked out Cloud-Based Mayhem by now, you've got to just go check it out. It's amazing. So Gavin is the one that he hosts the show. So normally he's the one that's interviewing people, and so tonight it's super fun to interview him. And Nick's had him on the show. Nick's been on his show a few times, and I think it's awesome. And so, anyways, go check out. That link is in the description. That's all I got. Now I got to bat these emails.
Okay.
These text messages. So I'm so glad you're here tonight, Nick. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, buddy. I got you.
You're awesome, man.
Ben, let's talk some training, dude. That's this is your time to shine. Let's start off, like, just for shock value. What does an average training cycle for Gavin look like?
I was trying to think of that, and it's so varied. I'm going to give you some averages that are pretty wide ranging, because we have some pretty mellow weeks and some pretty gnarly weeks. He averages between 15 and 40 hours a week of training. So that's, pushing a full-time job.
Yep.
Normally about 3 hours in the gym, not much more, and about 2 hours total doing some recovery practices. And then for the fun stuff, between 2 and 6 hours of pavement walking a week, 2 to 6 hours of non-specific endurance training a week, and 6 to 20 hours of uphill travel a week. So that can range from 10 to 25,000 feet of vertical climb in a given week, depending on where we are in the training cycle.
Golly. It's ridiculous, right?
It's ridiculous. Yes.
Yeah. How many, I missed it. How many days a week is he flying? Because that's just the land-based stuff, right?
Yeah. So that's land-based. And we're training him 6 days a week. I always give him an off day. I think it's important to get some rest. We incorporate flying into all of this. And our mantra is, if it's properly flyable, go fly. And we don't care if you miss the, quote, training, the exercise part. That being said, most of the uphill training, especially in the, fall, early winter, and then spring and summer, we're incorporating flying, whether it's ski and fly uphill, hike and flies. We do specific hike and flies where he works on speed of packing and unpacking, launching and landing in crappy places. Obviously, he knows way more about flying than me. What I try and do is give him some encouragement on doing more than just the same thing every time, and looking for unusual places to simulate the race. Sometimes we'll even we'll specify going to a new area and working on his map skills while he's exercising and flying. So we try and bring it all in together.
Nice. Dig it. Any heavy lifting, like big squat stuff, or is it all kind of Metcon focused?
No, almost no Metcon stuff. Because he's got so many miles going uphill, I try not to give him too many garbage reps in the gym. And so the gym stuff's really focused on some kind of base level strength. And then our big focus is durability, getting his chassis strong, and just getting him ready to prevent injury, whether it's an impact from a hard landing. Also just having good posture, carrying that pack day in and day out so that he doesn't start walking funny. That's what we use the gym stuff for.
Nice. Yeah. I'd say after, you had a crash earlier this year. I had one myself, and I was like, man, I got to do more stuff for durability. I got to do like head rotations and neck stuff like I used to do in wrestling, and be jumping off boxes and just being a little more prep for that dynamic kind of crash landing.
Yeah. I mean, For me and my crash, I credit, and so did my surgeon, not being paralyzed by being strong from being in the gym. So I think there's something to be said from to not getting too tiny.
Yeah. Dig it. Gavin, I'm assuming you're not flying the whole time in Sun Valley. Can you talk a little bit about where you're going to fly between now and the race? And if there's any kind of thought into that, or if it's just like, hey, I'll fly wherever I manage to get to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, it's important. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. I think it's important to stay hungry, you know, so I don't take the view that I just need to fly all winter. But I'll be down in Mexico for a little over 2 weeks for the for Marco's comp, the Fly Sky race, XC Sky race. And then I'll be there for the Monarca. And then I go immediately from there down to Columbia, or to British Nationals in Columbia. You know, this will all be on my race gear. This will not be, you know, XAlps style flying. And so we'll just keep, you know, those, when I'm flying, Ben moves me down into kind of like maintenance mode, and I do what I can, but I'm there to fly and I'm there to get hours. And we do a lot more kind of like hit type stuff, like short, you know, high impact, you know, get it done in an hour. So I don't, you know, so I can keep the flying going. And then I'll be going, I think, to Santa Barbara, it looks like, this year for a good month and a half. So March, a little bit of February, maybe a little bit of April. And then Ben and I'll tie in together a couple times there, and Revis down at Marshall and Santa Barbara, and bouncing around there and doing some map stuff and getting a lot of training, a lot of flying training there, because that's a great season for that. And then I'll be back, home, and the good chunk of April and May will be flying spring conditions, which will tune up my rowdiness. You know, you need to get your bump tolerance way up before the race. So that's where I'll be flying. In spring here is, you know, the thermals are ratty. They're really sharp, really strong. It's cold. It'll be great because the race is 3 weeks earlier this year. And, you know, so the cold is going to be a much bigger factor than it has been in the past. So I think that's the plan. And, you know, I think that'll work pretty well.
Cool. Any specific stuff? Are you doing any acro, any SIVs, anything like that between now and then?
Yeah, I'll do quite a bit of acro training. I'm going to hook up with Cody. You know, he's another one. He's Team USA 3.
Yep.
And I'll be hooking up with Cody to do quite a bit of acro. Willie, Team USA 2, lives right down the street from me, so I'll be able to do a lot of training with him. That's really convenient. But Cody's not far away. He's 5 hours down in Salt Lake. So I'll definitely get some acro. I did a bunch of acro training this fall. That's critical. And SIV, you know, my acro training is really SIV. It's, you know, I'm doing a lot of that kind of stuff over the water, pretty dynamic stuff. So, yes, that's super important.
Dig it. This one's a little bit for both of you. How has the training changed over the first couple of years? Like the first year, you didn't know what you're doing. The second year, you kind of probably thought you did. And then you're like, oh man, there's a thing or two we missed. Now it's the third race. What's different?
From my perspective, you know, the first year was all about his trepidation about his knees.
Yep.
And us building the base so that we could go into the race and feel like his knees were going to not fall apart. In that, we figured out they weren't going to fall apart, and he got really fit and really strong. And between his expeditions, some maintenance programs we put him on, he stayed very fit. So a lot of what we're doing now is really just like, it's still hard. It basically looks very similar, but it's just getting him tuned back up to where he needs to be, which is really about volume and just getting the body ready to handle 12 days in a row. So it has changed. It's not changed greatly from the physical side.
Interesting. As an aside, what have you learned just training Gavin as a kind of paraglider, racer, adventure, whatever, that you might be able to transfer to other paraglider pilots? You know, before you came into this, you're really mountain specific, and now it's kind of mountain and flying. Are you picking up stuff that's like, hey, paragliders need to be doing X, Y, Z?
Yeah, you know, I actually wrote an article for USPA that's out there somewhere, and I think number one is work on your durability. So, you know, having a little bit of quality strength and athleticism is a good word. Yep. You should be able to run and jump off of things and jump onto things. And if that scares you, then you're probably taking a risk being in a paraglider. Some basic aerobic fitness goes a long way. It keeps your head clear if you've had a short hike to launch, and it keeps your fitness up on a long flying day. So those are the two things I would focus on the most. And then with the hike and fly racing guys, then you just start adding in a lot more volume.
Dig it. I'll skip over a couple things, or maybe one after this. You mentioned a little bit before, is how much time will you have training in the Alps, Gavin, versus the average Euro this year? Let's say in the year leading up to it.
It really depends. Nick Nanens showed up the day before the prologue last time, I think. Oh, that's not true, because we have a whole week of the Red Bull stuff. You got safety
pretty close
and all that kind of. It's pretty close. Yeah. Kriegel doesn't scout any of it. Famously, I mean, he lives in the Alps. He's there. He doesn't, he's been all those places, but he doesn't want to have any preconceived notions of any of the turn points, and he wants to figure it out when he goes in there. So he doesn't like last year, for example, we all of us that had flown down to the Garda turn point were like, yeah, this basically can't be done. You get 40 miles an hour wind coming off the Mediterranean every single day, and it's coming from the south, and we're going south. How do you deal with that? Well, he did it. So, he didn't want to have that in his head. He wanted to figure it out, like he does. So, but the first in 2015, I had almost 2 months before, and that was way too much. It's just, at home, you have your food, you have your kitchen, you have your supplements, you have all the stuff, you have your kettlebells, and you've got your gym and your everything. And suddenly you're over in Europe, and you're trying to do that in the van. And it's, it's Europe, they have everything, but I can't get the stuff that I need to get. And it was in some ways, it was pretty demoralizing. I was by myself for 2 months trying to figure it out. And that was tough. And so when we went back in 2017, I didn't have nearly the trepidation that I did. I knew physically, it seemed like we'd done a lot less. And Ben was like, dude, look at the volume. It's way more. It's just, It's all cumulative. It just adds up. So I didn't have any stress going into it with the physical side. And so I think we tuned it down to like 3 weeks of prep, and we nailed it. Bruce and I just, we got the van right when I got there, and we went to all the areas that we thought were sticky or tricky, and places that we didn't really know that intimately, and got great flying, and it was a really terrifically good time. So we're going to repeat that this time. Revis and I are going to go over there about May 20th, like 3 weeks before the race, and we'll just pound it. And then it's kind of nice too, because about 2 weeks before the race, you start your taper, and you've got more time to just stretch and chill and drink tea and get your head around what you're about to do. And, but then you can keep flying a lot. I try to get really tuned up then with the hours in the air, and that's weather dependent, of course, but if you got the weather, then that's a nice time to do it.
Cool.
But I didn't answer your question about the others. I mean, it really depends. Some of these guys have really, very full-time jobs, and they'll be able to go scout on the weekends, and others are, they're out there training, and they have tons of time. So it really depends on where they're, everybody's different.
Dig it. What, one of the things I've heard you focusing on the podcast is psychology, sports psychology, meditation, visualization, all those things. Is there anything new that you're doing? Is there anything that you're doing different? Are there any kind of standard exercises that maybe you're doing that could be helpful for the rest of us normal pilots?
Well, Ben's magic for me, for sure, was introducing me to Kelly Starrett. This isn't new. We did this in 2015, but his book, The Supple Leopard, and I don't train without doing mobility at the end. And, there's always 15, 20 minutes. Ben gives it to me because he knows that I won't do it on my own if he doesn't spell it out. And, so I spend a lot of time on rollers and with balls and with bands, and, I'm 46. I need it anyway, and I've got bad knees. So that's number one for me. Is it just makes me like a little wombat. It makes me be able to bounce off stuff, and it makes me more durable. Like Ben says, I think that's really important. I've added a lot. You've helped me out with some of your books. Willing to win. What's the
with winning in mind? I think Lenny
winning
Bassel.
in mind. With winning in mind, Kahneman's. Thinking fast and slow. I've read a bunch of books on flow this year. Those haven't really been too helpful because I've actually, I know what flow is. I've spent a lot of time in flow, and paragliding just catapults you into flow. But they've been interesting. But I think the thing that we learned in the last 2 races is a little bit of quiet time. So I meditate every morning. The first thing I get up, I was using Headspace, and now I'm using Sam Harris. His app is fantastic. And so I spend 15 minutes every morning just meditating. It just makes me a nicer person, I think. But it also, I think with that practice, there were times in the race in 2015, 2017 where you're feeling rushed and you blast off the launch, and you need to take that 5 minutes to just like sit away from, one of the great flights I had, I remember doing that with Ben. I was just like, hey, I need a little bit of time out here, and just to sit and relax. And, you don't, again, slow is fast in that race. And so I think that however that is, that works for you. And I think that's super applicable to regular flying. We see way too many dumb errors, just people forgetting to clip in and forgetting to do their 4-point checks, and just being scrambled and being like, or watching some people blow a launch and get all like, oh no, and let that affect you. That's you've only got one shot. Every flight you do, I say this all the time on the podcast, but every flight you make is the most important flight, and I think that was one of the things that led to Ben's accident this spring, just too much shit and just too much input and not enough calm, not enough. I got this,
Yeah. So just going to the race, let's start with, what are the changes that you're either stoked or not stoked about this year? This is a new race, new year, new rules. What are you psyched on?
I'm stoked about the team flying rule. They have always allowed that in the past. It's never bothered me because Kriegel doesn't team fly, and it's obviously not helping him. It's not hurting him too much. But my next guest on the podcast is Damien Lacaze, who was Benoit's supporter, who got second last year. He was a rookie. He's amazing talent, awesome. Damien flew every single flight in the race with Benoit, the whole thing. It's amazing. Yeah. And they're banning that in this time, which is kind of how the XPure works. And I'm psyched about that. I just think it's more pure. That you have to figure it out on your own. It's definitely helpful if you're in the air with a really good pilot, and helping you out with the thermals and showing you that it's on. And I like Hansi used to always say he wanted a more no bull Redbull X-Alps, and so that's less bull, and I like that. Other than that, I think the from what I have read, the rules are pretty similar. Not much has changed. What I really like about the Redbull X-Alps is there's not many rules. You start, you can move between X and X, and you try to get as far as you possibly can. You got to hit some waypoints on the way. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, airspace is a big one, but that's just normal.
Cool. Hey, we're coming up on 7:00. I'd like to keep going. You guys know the questions I've got for you. Gavin and Ben, you guys both have a little bit extra time?
Of course.
Right on.
Cool.
All right.
Dig it. Thanks, David.
Yep.
So the race I was super psyched about, Gavin was with Mitch Riley, but he didn't get picked up this year. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah. Ben and I have talked about this a lot, and these are only opinions. Of course, we have no idea, but, and I actually talked about Jesse with this a couple nights ago as well. I think the working theory is that, in the past, if you had competed in the XAlps, you were kind of in. It was kind of like having the green card. And I think they just shook things up this time. And with a couple of exceptions, if you didn't win your country in the last race, you're not in this time. And so the exceptions are exceptions that we can all probably agree should be exceptions. Antoine Girard, one of the most famous expedition pilots in the world right now. He's a total badass. He got hurt the very first day of the last race, and he's in. Gaspard Petiot, amazing pilot. At one point, he was actually like tied with Kriegel, like day 6, like quite a ways into the race. Yep. And then he blew a landing, and he got hurt, and so he's back in. So with a couple of exceptions, but both those guys were 4th and 5th in 2015. So, right. So with a couple of exceptions, I think I think they're just looking for new blood. And I just think, unfortunately Mitch got eliminated last time. And, I think they're just, shaking things up.
Got it. Got it. And Mitch was a wild card entry last time, right? If I remember right.
Yes, that's right. It got in like December or January.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I thought I got that.
I should add, I think that, Mitch certainly deserves to be in. He's an amazing pilot. He's had an incredible year. He's super strong. He's tough. He did well in the Dolomiti. Maybe with 2020 hindsight, he should have competed in the X-Pier if he could have, and maybe if he'd done really well there, maybe. But I maybe not. I don't know. I think he's young. He's great. He needs to keep shooting for it, because look at me, I'm 46. He's got plenty of time. So I hope he keeps gunning for it. Mitch, if you're out there. And
yeah, I'd be psyched to see him. And he had such good energy on that conversation we had. I really liked him.
Yeah.
Now Red Bull pays for everything on this, right? There's you basically walk in and you kind of make money by doing this. Is that right?
I lost you there.
Yeah. I was saying Red Bull pays for everything on this, right? You don't pay for anything.
Yeah. So my last two campaigns, I'm sure you can do it cheaper for sure. But I like to take care of my crew when they get there, because, I can't afford to pay them. So, but when you add up the flights for your 3 people to get over there and get back, and the van rental, for the time before the race and during the race, and then just all the major costs, both of my campaigns have been about 30,000 each. And if you win, you get 10,000. So you don't even cover your costs if you win the whole thing. But no, it's expensive.
Yeah.
All right, so I believe we're going to be announcing the winners of the giveaway.
Tabin, let's hold that till the end.
All right,
that's
then.
Cool with you, unless you guys are desperate to push it out now.
Well, I guess we got about 10, 14 minutes left.
Yeah, we can hang that.
Yeah.
We can hang
All
that
right.
on to the end.
Okay.
All
cool.
right, then.
Let's do that.
All right, go ahead and continue.
So, Gav, you got a bunch of pilots psyched on the XAlps. I'm certainly one of them. Thinking it like at one point, one day, that'd be something to be good on, to be done, to go for. Is what should a pilot be able to do before they really consider that as like, hey, this next year I'm going to go for it?
God, I should let Ben answer that.
Sure.
So I've been thinking about that from a non-pilot side to start with. I think you got to be comfortable in the mountains. And so either got to be a mountain athlete or a mountain man or woman. And if you are one, you know what that means. And if you're not, you need to get out in the mountains. You need to be able to do really long all day efforts and understand really what it means to suffer a little bit. And if you haven't suffered much in your life physically, then get out there and do some of that. And then you got to be able to train hard and be focused. And that's very different than exercising. So that's on the non-pilot side. On the pilot side, being one of those guys who's not there, but you get to be with them and watch them and be at launch and sometimes fly with them. It's a very different level than 98% of everyone who's out there flying. You've got to be a mountain pilot first and foremost. I hate to say it, but if you live in the wrong place and you're not flying in the mountains regularly, you need to get there, because it's not flatland flying. It's not coastal flying. You got to be super dialed on super technical launches and landings. They can come at any time, anywhere. Lee side flying's got to be your friend. And you really have to know the limits of what you're doing when it's windy, and you got to be current. And we could go on, but I think those are your kind of baseline moves.
Okay.
I think, there have been, like Dave Turner, I think had only been flying 4 years when he did it in 2015. Benoit, who got second last time, had only been flying for 4 years. So, there are some exceptions to what I'm about to say, like them, those guys are just incredibly talented athletes, not just pilots, but just people. But you need to be really, really good pilot. And the only way to do that, there's not a lot of shortcuts, is a lot of years and a lot of hours. And so, most of the guys in the race, Antoine, I heard, was doing over 500 hours a year the last few years. That's proper exceptional. I mean, that is, that's, if he's really getting that, that's unbelievable. And, and then, but a minimum 300 hours a year. And that's almost a full-time job. I don't know that many people that can dedicate that kind of time to it. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. God knows I've been trying to do it. It's certainly, not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So every day the race stops from 10:30 to 5:30. Ben, I'm interested in kind of what is all you guys immediately going to sleep? What's Gavin doing? Kind of how does that look?
Every day is variable. Often we don't go right to the gun at 10:30. So we'll hopefully have had dinner prior to then. Gavin might do a little stretching, and then we try and have a little pre-briefing before bed of here's the general idea of what's happening tomorrow. So maybe Gavin can dream on it, scheme it, whatever. And then we try and get him in bed. And pretty quickly we try and get everything shut down and us go to bed too, because the weather can change so much in 12 or 8 hours. It's not super critical to be overthinking it. And then in the morning, mostly at night, we want to know, do we need to wake up on time early, or do we need to sleep in? Because I don't know, we're already near the launch we're going to use, something like that. So in the morning, we'll wake up and early before that 5:30 that you're talking about. That's me and Bruce, in this case, me and Revis, and we'll get a little power shake made for Gav, get some coffee brewing, and then we'll shake him out about 15 minutes before go time so he can get dressed. And we'll get him a little slurp of like a shake and some coffee, and he's out the door.
Dig it. And then food the rest of the day? It's just kind of whatever catch can?
In the perfect world, when we scheme it out, it's that shake kind of lasts him until we stop for our proper morning briefing, which hopefully is around the place that we're going to start hiking uphill. And then we feed him proper breakfast, eggs, sausage, that kind of stuff. And then I might carry a little lunch with me for him going uphill. So we'll hike up to the launch, either give him the lunch, or if it's been a big enough hike, he'd eat it then. Of course, supplemented by certain kind of sports supplements, Vespa, power bar type stuff, not power bar specific, but
Yep.
And then he'll go fly. And later that evening we'll have, it depends. Sometimes it's a light snack and then proper dinner, or we'll do dinner and then he'll keep walking for another 3 hours. So
cool. Yeah.
Whole food is good.
Dinner is like massive, typically like, one of the ones I remember last time is be like 3 pork chops and 2 big things of cream cheese, like the whole block, and, just massive amount of fat and protein, like as much as I could possibly eat. That's the meal. That's the one that you need. That's
the mega meal. Oh, you got all night to digest it. So
exactly. Yeah.
Let's kind of wrap it up with the sharing knowledge piece. Is Ben, from the training stuff you talked about a little bit, but anything that you can pass on for the rest of us that you've learned watching 2 of these races and preparing for a third?
I passed on the training stuff, and then from just kind of a nerdy gear perspective, things that are I think not used in the general paragliding world but are super beneficial, or kind of merging Gaia, Google Earth, EarthMate, all the map apps, for lack of a better word. If you're a cross-country pilot, not only where to launch from, where to fly, what to do if you land out. If you're a Vol Biv pilot, these things are invaluable. Paper maps, they don't work when you're going 1,000 kilometers. You can't carry, that'd be a bus of paper. So really understanding the technology that's out there is one of the things that I would pass on for sure. And without a doubt, if you're not flying with a Delorme and you're, I think, any kind of pilot, but especially if you're a cross-country pilot, I think you're wrong. You need to be doing that.
Dig it. Anything else, knowledge sharing, recovery? I mean, I think we hit all this stuff in the conversation already. Anything I missed that you guys wanted to share?
Oh, I had one thing just on, no, sorry, that was something else.
Okay.
Good.
What do you think the top 3 looks like this year?
I'll call my ball first. Sorry, I still think Kriegel's going to win. I'm going to throw the gauntlet down saying you're going to get second. And I think Petio's in for third because that guy's just too good of a pilot.
My dad's gonna win first place for sure.
Gavin, nice, David. Gavin, what do you think, dude?
Yeah, so I mean, it was pretty funny in 2017. The whole talk in the camp before was, "This is the year Kriegel's going down. This is the year Kriegel's going down." You know, he's unbelievable. He's professional at every level. It's not just the physical side, it's the training. He's doing this is what he does, and he's really, really good at it. So he is no doubt the guy to beat. I have radically shifted my mental approach, you know, in this last year. You know, you can't win if you're not going there and win. So, you know, I say this humbly, but I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, I'm training as hard as I possibly can. I'm giving it everything. If I don't win, I'm still going to have a blast. Our team's going to have a blast. We're going to be safe. And, you know, that's what's way more important, but yeah, I'm going to win. And, you know, I top 3 Kriegel for sure. Gaspard's a good call. I like that one. You know, the magic about Gaspard is, he never walks more than like 10K. He's that good of a pilot. He's got way worse knees than I do. You know, he's also got 2 behind him now. He's hungry. His brother is his supporter. He's a wicked pilot, like crazy good. I like that one. I'm going to go with that one.
Okay. What's the biggest fear you guys have this year? What do you look at and say like, okay, this is the thing we can prepare for the least, but that'll affect us the most?
I'll take that one first. Yeah, I thought about this before. I've been thinking about this last day. I know this sounds kind of corny, but my biggest fear is that it's going to end. I said that in the beginning, but that is, but I'll try to give you a real answer. I'm afraid that we lost Bruce, and Bruce was magic. And you know, I hope that, you know, we won't know until we start how Ben and Revis get along, and how that, you know, if they can just work really as a team, because I just didn't understand how critical that was in 2015, and I got to see the magic that those guys could pull off in 2017. I mean, I know it didn't show in our results, but those guys were doing some pretty amazing things. And you do that because you're together and you've worked together and you know what you're doing, and you have that communication that doesn't require any talking. And that sometimes happens and it sometimes doesn't. So that's a personal fear of mine, but I think the odds are really good. Revis is funny. He's dry. I think he's going to get Ben's humor. I think he's going to be right up there with giving me a bunch of crap, which is important on our team.
Yeah.
And like I said, he is technical and he is good. He's a really good pilot. And so I think it's going to help.
Cool. Ben?
You know, kind of related to what Gavin said, my personal fear is the one I've had every race, which is just I can't screw up something that leads to Gavin losing massive time. And like you said, we don't hold any screw ups against each other, but that's what I walk around with, is I better be right. And that's what keeps me up at night for sure.
Cool. We'll switch through the last 2 questions. Any suggestions for first-time XAlpers, people coming in this time? Maybe they're digging up every piece of information they can. They find the show and they're like, what do those guys got for me?
Get a trainer. You know, I don't care if you've done a whole bunch of ultrathons. You don't know what this is all about. And it's, you know, even if you've done the X Peer, you get like a little slice, a little taste. But it's, you know, it's a third of the XAlps. So, you know, I think the more stress, there's so many aspects of this race that if you can put some of those away, you know, and not have to think about them, then, you know, that to me is just way more important than having a new glider or something else. I mean, that to me was so stressful for me, and maybe other people aren't as stressed about it, but for me, that I would have just never even considered this. In fact, I didn't consider this, except one day I was skiing with Ben and I was like, hey, you know, do you think I could do something like this? And he's like, I can train you to do something like that. And I just parked it. He's like, yeah, totally. And having that confidence and having that, you're, what's the word when you're accountable. You've got this thing that he's put a bunch of effort into every day. It's not like I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to go do that. I'm accountable. And now I know from the other 2 races that when I get there on the starting line, I know physically I'll be ready. So it's just a huge chunk of stress that I can let go of right in the beginning. So that would be my biggest one is get a trainer. You have no idea what you're in for.
Nice. And Ben, anything from you? First timers, what are you telling them?
One word, team. Spend time making your team right for you as an athlete, and knowing that however you put it together, where it's 2 people, 3 or 5, that they're going to get along. Because we had an awesome experience and we got to watch some magical explosions of other teams, and it is not cool. And it takes everything that we talked about, all that effort, all that money, all that sacrifice, and it can make it not fun. And this race should be fun. So have a fun team.
Take it.
Yep.
Well, speaking of that, I'm sure there's a bunch of us who would love to support you and make sure that we do what we can on our end to help Team USA Team 1. Where do folks go to support you and the other American teams?
Yeah, so our website just went live today. We are going to have a link very soon to support the Foundation for Free Flight, so give it a few days. But it's usaxalps.org. You can learn all about the race, us, the past U.S. athletes. We will have that up shortly. But we're going to be doing a really cool fundraising. It's not a donation campaign. It's a really cool fundraising campaign with XAlps t-shirts and raffle tickets with stuff that's coming from Eagle Paragliding and Superfly and a bunch of different places. So really cool prizes that you can win. And all the money is going to get funneled to the Foundation for Free Flight. And they're amazing and they do incredible work. They're all volunteer staff. And they keep all the sites that we all here and everybody listening love to fly open. So super important. I think we're really excited about that and supporting them. And that'll come back to us in the way of a grant from the foundation. So yeah, that'll be live. The website's live, but usaxalps.org. You can check that out in a few days and all the details will be there.
Right on.
Can you repeat the link real quick so I can write this down for my dad?
usaxalps.org.
And I'll send it over to him, Tabin. We'll take care of it.
All right. So kind of bent the rules a little bit, but
good.
I believe Paris.
Tell me about the winner of this t-shirt, dude.
I believe Perspective will be taking care of that.
Wow, you got my name better than your dad does. All right, so sometimes we randomly pull names out of a hat. Other times we specifically pick a winner. Tonight, specifically picked a winner. He's been watching the show since its beginning. So, Rip Riding Man, you won the t-shirt tonight, buddy. So
congratulations. Oh, yeah, and this is what I look like, in case you were wondering.
Good work.
We were all wondering.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to show my face. I was like clicking on stuff. I was like, I should probably stop doing this. And then I saw that the camera was not on. So
I'm glad you
yeah. So if you're wondering, these are what the shirts look like. I don't know if you guys could see that. But
yeah,
pretty nice shirts. Make sure to subscribe. Like the video. Congratulations for winning this new shirt.
And Rip Riding Man, hit us up on Facebook, or you can hit up Robert at his email address. The email address is on the paraglidingtalk.com website. So let me know before we end the show here, and we'll get you a t-shirt.
Cool. Gavin and Ben, thanks a ton for coming on. Thanks to the rest of you for doing the admin and the chat side. Tabin, way to step in for Pop. And I think that'll
good job, Tabin. Right on.
Thank you. And
thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Can we have some thanks for our moderators to make sure that there's no cussing inside the chat room?
Yeah, you did a pretty good job.
Keeping it clean.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
I'm out of here. Bye-bye.
Bye.